How to be seductive via text messages. Text messaging can actually be a very effective tool for not only seducing another person, but really altering their feelings towards you and getting them in that direction of moving towards you. There is, however, a danger with text messages, and that is going too far, maybe being overtly sexual or crossing over boundaries that the other person might not be ready for. How much or how expressive you are has a lot to do with the timeline of your connection with the other person. How long have you known them? How long have you been texting the other person? All these things come into play with how you express yourself with the other. But the wisest choice is to stay in a more neutral and pleasing seductive state. And I'm going to show you how to do that so that you could be a master at seducing others via text messages. So before I tell you some of the tips, here are a few things you don't want to do. You don't want to be overly sexual. You don't want to be vulgar. You don't want to have to actually say things necessarily that are too expressive, because after all, that is really not seduction anyhow. Seduction is sort of like a dance. It's a lead-in of the other person into a particular state, into a particular way of thinking and being. When you hit a person over the head with, something really vulgar or something very expressive, you are removing that dance, you're removing that play, you're removing that wonderful feeling that builds over a period of time, and you're just sort of opening the door and saying, hey, kind of like somebody saying, I want to F you. So you don't want to do that. I mean, maybe there is a time for that. There's a time for that, especially if you've been with that person for a very long time and the two of you have reached that place where you're comfortable with that sort of expression and you're more in a more mature state of your connection. And by mature, it could be months, it could be weeks. It all depends on who the other person is, because every situation is going to be very different. But what I will tell you to do, and what I will say is very effective, is to lead the other person and allow them to fill in the blanks for themselves. What I would recommend that you do is to lead the other person, be suggestive, and let them fill in the blanks. Let them seduce themselves, really. And how you do that is by giving a hint, sort of leading the way, but letting them fill in their own particular brand of feelings, or fill in what it is that makes them feel really good. And so there's actually a really great advantage to doing that, because in doing that, you get the opportunity to know how the other person feels, or to know their fantasies, or to know their interests, or how far to go with the other person. So here we go. One of the very best ways to seduce someone is to ask questions. Ask seductive questions and let them fill in the blank. See, and I'll tell you why this works. If I said to somebody via text messages, let's climb into the back seat of a car and have a hot, passionate session, that may sound seductive to me, but it may not be the other person's passion. It may not be what stirs the other person. And you could potentially sort of go off on a tangent expressing these wonderful, flowery, seductive moments, while the other person may sort of go along with you to make you feel good, but it just may not be their fantasy. It may not be the thing that stirs the other person at all. So rather than filling in the blanks in the very beginning, play with the possibilities so that you can get an idea of what stirs the other person. This should really be a warm-up to seductive texting. So you may say something like, well, it's a rainy day today, and I feel like staying home and laying around in bed. What would you do on a rainy day? So, what you have done is introduce the seduction, but allow them to fill in the blanks. So now both of you are participating as opposed to you leading the way, creating the story, and then having them follow along with you. What happens when you do this is that you get the opportunity to know how they feel. So maybe the other person gets the opportunity to then tell you what they would do on a rainy day. What is their fantasy? After they've told you, you can then join them in the fantasy, and it now becomes two of you having this experience, and you can go from there and progressively add more of this sort of play of words to get the other person feeling how you want them to feel, or feeling that connection and that excitement and that sexual seductive energy. Here's another tip. Try seductive games. For example, you may say something like, I'm going to I'm going to give you a letter in the alphabet, and you can come up with a seductive word for that letter. So you may choose a letter and give the other person an opportunity to think of a seductive thought or seductive word that would match the letter. And what that does in the process is get both you and the other person warmed up in the play of seductive ideas. You see, oftentimes when we try to be seductive via text messages, we try to do everything fast. We try to hit the other person over the head, let them know that we can't wait to get into their pants and we can't wait to do this and that. And then you lose the entire connection. You lose that. What you're getting is this sort of cold, hard, I want to do X, Y, and Z. And, how does that feel? And it doesn't always translate smoothly, and it isn't seduction. It isn't seductive in any form. It's just cold, hard, and dry. So again, lead people by asking questions. Lead the way by starting off with a seductive question and let them fill in the blanks. And second of all, try seductive games. Get them to think in that direction. You see, a lot of what makes us feel seductive is a lot of what goes on in the imagination. When you omit the imagination and you go straight into the hardcore visuals of everything, you skip a point, and you skip the opportunity to get the other person's sexual energies to rise through their being. And a true seductress or true seducer knows how to get that sexual energy to rise through the other person through play and without force. Oftentimes we go too hard and too fast. So once again, when it comes to seductive texting, you want to make it a bit of a tease. And the more you tease the other person, the more excited they become, and the more you flood their thinking and the anticipation for more of it, because you're teasing and pulling them along, as opposed to being very cold and hardcore. If you like this information, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to learn the most powerful teachings on sexual magnetism, please click the link inside this video where you will learn some of the most incredible methods of influencing others so that you could lead them in your direction. Some of these teachings are so profound and esoteric that they will change your life.